Hey everybody, welcome to Reality Chat. Hope you guys are gonna be in for a treat today. So I'm going to invite Michelle on.
Hi.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. I'm here.
Yes, you are. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It was a good day. I'm admittedly a little nervous because I've never done a live before, but I'm sure it'll be fun. So I sort of just focused on creating things and keeping my mind busy. I did my yoga. I actually usually only do 30 minutes, but I was like, I need an hour today. So I did an hour of yoga, and I've been fiddling with my 3D printer, which has been kind of fun. So yeah.
Okay, I saw the thing you posted about that button that you were drilling holes in. I didn't know that you had a 3D printer, so that's really cool.
Yeah, it's been collecting dust for like a year and a half. It was a present to myself way back when, just for my birthday and Christmas. And it's a cheap one. It's not too nice, but it does the job. It's good. It's good for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, I think.
Okay, well, as someone that used to run a fabrication lab that had a bunch of 3D printers in it for a college, um, the best 3D printer is not always the best 3D printer. And so if
Okay,
it does,
wait. Okay, explain.
like, some just look sexy or like they're easy to use, but uh,
Mm,
they're not like, if you really want to use it to do stuff, it can be pretty difficult, or they have problems and you have to call customer service rather than just fix it yourself or something like that.
like you can't YouTube it. Like there's not enough, or it's like that fancy that it's like for
Yeah,
not
like
not users.
kind of like with Apple products, where like if I broke my battery and I had a Windows computer, usually I can just
Mm,
pop the battery out and buy a new one and plop it in. But if I like broke my battery on my Apple laptop or my Apple phone, then it's
oh
this like
yeah,
whole ordeal to take the phone apart, and it's that kind
true.
of.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, this is definitely. I think this is a 3D printer that people have used. Like they'll buy the 3D printer and then they'll print the parts and they'll duplicate it. It's like one of those
Okay.
kind of, yeah. I think my brother, he was working at the maker space at UCLA for a while, and right now he isn't because of the situation. But he was comparing what I have to a Prusa. I don't know if you guys had Prusas, but mine's like a Creality Ender Pro, but
Okay.
it's like a Prusa. I don't know. That's all I can say about the 3D printer.
Okay. Well, I think before we get into the conversation, I do want to see how you're doing and stuff, but I also want to like introduce what we're doing in case the people that are watching are kind of like, what's going on? So,
I mean, we could do this too. Yeah, no, definitely introduce.
hello everybody. My name is Jordan Tremaine, and I am being joined today by the great Michelle, the creative extraordinaire. And this is Reality Chat. This is a weekly Instagram live video conversation between two people to try and really get to the heart of a subject or dig a little deeper than you normally do in regular conversation, and hopefully come to some interesting insights. I'm watching the comments and stuff, so if you have something to say or a question, post it, and if we have a place to get to it, maybe we'll address it. But I'm basically just going to be talking to Michelle about today's topic, which is creativity. And I think it's a really good one to talk to Michelle about, because I think if there's one word you can use to describe her, creativity is definitely a good one.
Thank
So
you.
I know Michelle as a person that I met when I was younger in public school, and a fashion lady. She does a lot of custom dresses, and right now
Mm-hmm.
she makes I don't even know where mine is. She makes like really cool custom masks for the quarantine stuff. But Michelle, I know I don't really know everything you do. So would it be okay if you did a little bit of introduction to what you've been up to?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a freelance fashion designer. I also sometimes work on sets as a costumer, dresser, and yeah, I'm mostly a one-woman show. I can do everything from sketching to making the patterns to sewing and all the finishing touches. Like I've had to do it all because my circumstances are such that I don't come from a lot of money. I come from a working class background, and I'm grateful for that because it has made me a bit more independent, and it's forced me to, I don't know, just like figure out how to do everything that I need to do to make what I have in my mind a reality. Uh,
Okay.
and yeah.
Just so you guys can see, Michelle made this wonderful mask for me, which so far is the favorite mask that I have been able to acquire in the quarantine land. Partially because I can put it on with one hand.
Okay, yeah, he's made renovate. I mean, that's pretty amazing, actually.
But I mean,
I
I like it. It's
like
pretty good.
redesigned it. That's pretty awesome.
So, as an example of some of her work. But that's an interesting point that you brought up in kind of the opener to yourself, where some of what you do comes from where you come from and how you were raised and stuff, where you kind of figure out a lot of different things and the entire process, not necessarily like I only do this part and then other people do
Mm,
this.
yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are some designers that can't sew or they don't draw, and that's okay. They have brilliant minds and they're able to convey what they want to the people who have those skills, and they can then create everything. But I've found a lot of value in knowing all the little steps that go into creating a piece. I think it also helps me appreciate how much goes into things that people will sometimes take for granted. And yeah, no, I mean, my parents were really, I'm very grateful that they were pretty encouraging of me as an artist when I was younger. It was for my dad, at least, he would always tell me this story where it's really sad. When he was maybe in first grade or so, he was drawing something, and his teacher looked at it and just told him, "You copied that. You didn't draw that. You shouldn't copy." And my dad was defending himself, saying, "No, I didn't copy it. I'm drawing." Like, she thought he was tracing it, right? Like, he didn't have the skills to actually produce what he was producing. And the teacher wouldn't listen to him, and eventually he was just like, why am I even doing this? And so he said at a very young age he kind of lost his interest in art because someone had stifled it out of him. And so I think when he and my mom both saw that I think a lot of children love to create. That's another thing I want to quickly say before I get back to my story, but I think everyone has it in them to be creative. Um, and everyone is a creator, but yeah, they really wanted to continue to encourage that within me. And I'm really appreciative of that. I mean, like, my dad would even, like, when I was really young, I remember dictating stories to my dad because I couldn't write. All I could do was think and say things. And so I would be sitting on my dad's lap, probably 5 years old or 4 years. I don't know how old I was. And I would just tell him these stories, and he would scribe them for me. Like, they were very involved, and yeah, I'm thankful for that.
That's I think I resonate with that a lot because I'm not too into fashion, but I feel that I'm a creator of sorts. I do engineering for a living. I've worked on a lot of projects outside of my profession, and right now the project that I'm doing, which is the philosophy and critical thinking project, it's just about coming up with concepts that I think are interesting and worth sharing, and then also getting other people online to talk and stuff like that. But there was a there was this one time I was shopping with my mom when I was younger. We were at Winco, and it was late. It was like 10 p.m. or something, like 11 p.m. And we were in the checkout line, and we were like, got our cart, and we're gonna be checking out to buy groceries, and there was a mom in front of us, and a kid came up to the mom. I'm assuming it was her kid. And
Okay.
the kid was like, "Mom, can we buy this book?" And the kid had a book in his hand. And the mom looked at him and gave him like the most evil look. And she was like, "Put that back. You know we don't buy books." And I was like, whoa. And I just like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like I should help, but I didn't even know how to help.
Yeah.
And like, I am very blessed that I never got that when I was little. And I was always encouraged to be creative. And you asked my mom, I broke a lot of stuff.
Terrible. You're like my brother. Oh my God. The things he destroyed in our house. I mean, there's still scars. Like things just, they were never fixed. But it's good. He's all to create, to learn how things are built and to take them apart. It's okay. But you were saying.
And like the not only like being creative, because I think you're right, everybody, in my opinion at least, is a creator and is creative. I think the common definition of creativity is not correct because it focuses too much on things like music and painting, when I think making anything is creative. Making a bridge is creative.
Yes.
Making a child is like raising a child is creative. You come up with all these different ways to teach them this or do different things. And if you stifle that at all rather than encouraging it, it's something like a fire where you can make it bigger, but if you put it out, it's much harder to like start again.
Yeah, no, that's a really good analogy. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember growing up when I was younger, and I might go back to my childhood a lot, but when I was younger, I remember I felt really lonely, and I think I've told you this story before, but I just really wanted other people to draw with me, to make things with me. And it wasn't so much that I was pushing it on people. It was, you know, they would see something I was making and they'd say, "Oh, that's so cool." And then my instinct was, let me show you how to make it. Like, I would love to show you how to make this. I would be, you know, I would love to show you how to draw this. It's totally possible. And I think I just remember as a kid getting rejected so much. Like, so many kids would say, "No, I can't do that. No, I don't have that talent." And I'm thinking to myself, like, I was not pushed out being able to draw, you know. And but it's also, it's just unfortunate because they may have had someone in their lives that convinced them that that was true, even though that's not true of themselves. And I think parents and educators, they play a big part in that. I mean, I also remember other parts in my life where someone could have tried to stifle my desire to create or just be myself. But I'm really fortunate again that like with teachers. So my parents were very supportive, but in kindergarten we had a Valentine's Day project and we all had these little hearts and we had to color them. But I was like, I don't want you to draw my heart. I want to draw my heart. And it was horrible. It was just so it was hideous, but I was 5 and I wanted to draw it myself. And my teacher was like, "Okay, you draw your own and you can color it." And that was one instance where an educator, you know, if they're really controlling, they might say, "No, I want everything to be uniform. No, you need to follow the rules." But I'm grateful that that wasn't the case. And there was this other time at Ranch View, like I'm giving away location. Anyways, censor that. At my elementary school. I don't know if this was the same at your elementary school, but we had an art teacher that would come by like twice a year. Did that happen for you guys? I mean, I wish arts were more, or maybe it was once a year. It wasn't very often.
Okay.
But we had this art teacher and she'd come by once in a blue moon. And one time she had an assistant. And so we were trying to learn how to draw faces. And by elementary school, I was already playing around with portraits. Again, they weren't anything exceptional. They were very abstract, but I was already drawing portraits and I had a way of doing them myself. And so the assistant, you know, this art teacher already knew me. She'd known me for a while. She'd watched me kind of grow up. But this assistant saw me drawing, not listening to her. She was telling us how to draw ears. And she was like, "Draw like a 6 or a 9 or something." And I was like, no, I'm going to drop my way. And I was ignoring her. And the assistant, I remember her coming up behind me, and I remember she was just about to say something. And even as a child, I knew I was in trouble. I was like, oh, fuck, like they found out. But as soon as like a sound came out of her mouth, the art teacher stopped her and said, no, just let her do her thing. And, you know, it's like those moments, those could have changed my trajectory completely. And I think that unfortunately people do face that. I don't think it's ever too late a time to readjust that thinking and remind ourselves that we can create. What these people said to us doesn't have to be our narrative. It's tricky. I mean, even now though, I think that I now as an adult struggle more with my own thoughts, saying all the things that people didn't say to me when I was growing up, but telling me, oh, you can't do that, or oh, you know, that's not good enough, or look at how great they're, you know, it's a struggle. It's an ongoing struggle, and even I'm dealing with myself more than anything.
Yeah, that's I think it's so crazy how like with a lot of things that I think like humankind really treasures, and I think creativity is one of the things that we treasure a lot for people that are really creative. I think it's something that you can look at it as a talent. I'm not too big of a believer in talent or like natural, I was born good at this. I think more that there are certain people who are privileged enough to be able to develop interests and follow them and be supported in them. And then there's other people who are less privileged who are told they have to do a certain thing or told they have to do a certain thing a certain way. And they fall into like believing that. But something you were saying I thought was really interesting. And eventually I'm going to get to asking you what creativity is, but I'm on something else right now. Yeah, it's an open-ended question. But there's this thing called Superman syndrome, where it's like if a person has it, they always want to help other people, even at their detriment. They want to like save the world. And this is like a bit, especially like a thing in relationships where you like try to like save your partner or whatever. But I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that to say I'm not talking about that. But there's this thing that I just made up called superhero syndrome, where when you were talking, it was making me think of it because there's a lot of times where I know that the reason I'm good at this is because I messed up a lot and I kept being interested and I was supported, not because I was just born great. Right. And so when somebody is interested and I show them and they're like, oh, can I see that? And I show them and then I'm like, you want to try? I'll show you, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm trying to be supportive and give other people the same opportunities I was given, even if I don't realize that at the time.
Right.
But I think the other person has what I'm going to call the superhero syndrome, where for some reason they don't look at you as Michelle. They look at you as like Wonder Woman, and they're like, so no, you're an Amazonian goddess. That's the reason you can do this. And I'm a human. Then those are different. That's like saying birds can fly and dogs can run, but the bird can't be like, hey dog, why don't you come fly with me? And the dog's like, no. And it's something like that. And I'm not sure where that comes from, but I feel like I've had that a lot.
Where you've experienced someone else being too like they don't understand how you came to the point you're at right now. Is that what you mean?
I think that's a version of it. But the focus of what I'm saying now is not that they don't understand how I came to it, but they treat it as if they could not become it. Like I could do it, but they could not.
Right.
And I'm not sure where that comes from, but I think in terms of trying to support people in their creativity and have them learn and grow, like overcoming the superhero syndrome where you treat your heroes, you treat the people who are doing what you're doing more like, oh, that's just a person who tries more than me, so maybe I should just try harder. You do that rather than saying like, oh, this person is a god. I can never be like that, blah, 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 blah. Like that's like...
I mean, I think it's actually, yeah, that's really interesting point. And I think that is it. I mean, I think even I experience that if I'm at an especially low point and I feel like, oh, you know, I don't really have the stuff. I'm not cut out for this. Why can't I why can't I beat an entire gown, or why can't I do all these, I think, I don't know, that's tricky. And I'm sure it's dependent on each individual but I would think that it's something that just happens over time, right? If you're worn down time and time again, or if you feel like defeated, or you feel like you're not supported and this just keeps happening and you don't have as many wins, I mean, I think you do start to believe that, well, maybe I'm just not capable, but it could just be, you know, the people that you're trying to receive validation from, the fact that you're trying to receive validation from other people. um, it could also be, it could be circumstance, like maybe it is going to be a little harder for you to attempt to learn this new skill because you have more cards stacked against you, you have like more obligations. It isn't to say that you're not capable, but it's just, it might be trickier. You have to figure out your own path. I don't know. I mean, that's something that I think I would have to sit with.
That's cool.
But yeah.
Just bringing it up, but yeah, well, I think I'm gonna go back and kind of a little bit scratch on what I said about talent, where I think there's certain things where like uh, depending on who you are, sometimes you are naturally more suited for something. So like if you take football, um, the tall, lanky people are not the people on the front line being linebackers or linesmen or whatever the name is, doing the tackling right when they say hike. Those are the people that are like the wide receivers. They're tall and they can run fast. But then the short, stubby people are not the wide receivers typically. They're the people tackling and protecting the line. And so to some extent, I feel like being truly creative and finding your path is about understanding who you are and understanding what you can do. And I guess you can look at that as like talent, but I think most of it is about trying and then learning all the ways you can fail. And like I really like how you started this with how you do all the parts of the process. You don't have this like, oh, I do this, and then there's this mystery part where I mail in this fabric and it comes back as a dress. And I'm like, you know exactly what happens. This. And I think that's a big part of creativity, like what I would call like true creativity, is being interested enough and diligent enough to learn and fail at everything and not just say like, oh, I'm good at this, I'm gonna focus on this, even though this is also important. I know I've heard you comment about your love of sewing, and that's part of the process if you're going to be making garments.
Yes.
So, that's interesting. But I wanted to hear. I don't expect like the perfect definition or for you to be able to say it all. It's a very big concept. But
okay. Yes, I know what's coming.
backing out of specific instances, this idea of creativity or creating is very interesting to me. And for someone like yourself that I think does it, it's interesting to get in your head. And I don't think I'm not sure if you can explain it right, because I remember like back when I was a swimming coach, people would like ask me, or my students would ask me, hey, what's this, what's that, and I wouldn't even know. I would have to go swim a lap and then pay attention to what their question they were asking, like, what am I doing while I'm swimming? And then I'd be like, and then I'd come back, I was like, oh yeah, it's like this, but I wouldn't know off the top of my head because it's just something I do. It's not something I think about.
And it's funny you say that, because I think that's it. There's moments where I have epiphanies and I'm like, yes, like this is the soul of creation and I figure it out, but I'm doing something. But yeah, if someone just asked me, like, I mean, like for instance, if someone asked me what inspires me, that is honestly the toughest question. And I just, you know, I always have to take a moment and I'm like, I don't know. But I will try. I will try and create a definition for creativity.
Not necessarily definitely. Like, what do you think about it? What are some of your thoughts on it?
So I think so creation and creativity, I guess like the way we see creativity, we associate it with innovation, right? So if you're being creative, you are trying to come up with like a novel way to execute something. And like you said earlier, that could be anything. It doesn't have to be art. It could be like raising a child, it could be cooking, it could be just so many different things. And then I see like creation, and I think both are essential to happiness. And personally, that's my thought. I think that being able to create and also being able to stretch your mind and, you know, through what you've learned in the past and through all the things that you've created, be creative. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I think being creative, it can be tough. It depends on your state of mind. And I think, I don't know, I think that you definitely have to have already put in some form of work prior. And so going back to creating, I know I'm just jumping between words. Who knows what I'm saying, but going
You're
back
a creative. I mean, what do I expect?
going back to creating, if I'm not feeling especially creative, I will just want to make things. So I'll just want, like, I still will feel that impulse to want to just, like, with my hands or with, you know, I mean, less so with my mind, I guess, but with my hands, like, just make stuff. And I know you mentioned sewing. So sewing is, in the past, me and sewing have had a tricky relationship. It's the part of the process that I don't feel like I can stretch my mind within. It's very much, you have to do it right, and that is it. Do it right. But I don't know if that's always true, actually. I think that lately I've been trying to figure out how to redefine my relationship with sewing so that I can actually enjoy it, and that it is, maybe it's not so much creative, but there's still something it's giving me. And so in doing that, so okay, you know, I'm gonna like rewind real quick, but not too far back, like a few months. I'm gonna rewind to the start of all of this, right? So COVID hits, and I was really struggling for like a month and a half. You know, I thought to myself, like, oh, you know, I think a lot of things are getting postponed, so maybe I'm gonna have all this time to make all the stuff that I've wanted to make. And it didn't actually turn out that way. I was really hard on myself. And it wasn't until I started making masks, and that really, for me, the making the masks, it isn't like I'm creating like new designs. It's more so I'm just making things. But by making the masks, I don't know, it did something to me. It's like it rebooted me. I felt like, oh, this is, you know, I don't know. I'm putting something into the world. I'm helping people. I hope in some way. I don't know. And as I was making them, it's so interesting. I think within 3 days of me just making masks, kind of mindlessly, I was just like listening to podcasts and sewing them. I started to just draw again. I don't know. I can't totally explain that, other than I think maybe it gave me back some confidence that yes, you can still make things, and now you can take it further. I don't know.
I think I have a concept that may allude to that. And it's funny, like in terms of like feeling low. I remember in high school, for some reason, my mind would like do things to me to keep myself motivated. And especially in sports, when I knew I had to do something that I wasn't sure I could do, my mind would always just start playing the theme song to the Pokemon cartoon, which is amazing. Like, it's an amazingly motivating song if you listen to the lyrics.
I agree.
Like, ignore the Pokemon part. Like, every time I stepped up on the podium to like dive in and swim, that song would start, and it is very interesting. That's leading me to what I wanted to bring up, which is a concept in my mind called stoking the creative engine, where I feel like creativity, you can be creative, but creativity and creating, it's more of a verb rather than a noun. It's more of an action rather than a state. And there's times where you can have difficulty with being creative. And I think like if you looked at creativity like an engine, you got to give it what it needs so that it can move. And then you got to like turn it on and rev it so that it can move. You need to give it gas and you need to use it. But also sometimes, and you brought this up with the COVID thing, it just made me think of this now, where like if you think of like a car engine belongs in a car. That's its like regular environment. And that's like, let's say the car is like a Honda Civic, and that's your daily life. Not to berate you. I just picked a Honda Civic. That was the first car I could think of.
I have an
And
Odyssey, but go on.
okay, it's an Odyssey. And then let's say something causes your entire life situation to change. I think that's like picking the motor up and putting it in a different car. Like, you know, you may still be able to function, but it's like new, and like you drive it differently, the gears work shifting differently and stuff like that. And you may need to do some things in order to warm up your engine so that you can get going. I know for me, like when I have to study or when I'm facing a really hard challenge or something, I'll just go do something that I know I can accomplish. Like I'll go ride my bike. I know I'm pretty good at that. I'll read something. I'll know I'm pretty good at that. I'll go help somebody. I know I'm pretty good. And I'll just start, like when I feel paralyzed, like, oh, I don't know what to do. Rather than not doing anything, because I know that's coming. Like if I keep being paralyzed long enough, I'll shut down. And I think that's like stalling out in a manual transmission engine. Like if you wait there too long, you'll stall out. But if you just start doing things, it can like start getting this flame hotter and hotter and hotter to the point where it's hot enough to actually operate at your creativity level.
I mean, yeah, no, I really like what you're saying there, because I think you're right. I mean, accomplishing something that you know you can accomplish, it's like boosting, it's a much needed reassurance that yes, you are still capable. Don't forget that, you know, you always were capable, but you needed a little reminder. And so participate in this activity or make this thing that you know you can complete it and it'll be great. And then, I don't know, it's like once, you're right, like once you've warmed yourself up, you realize, oh yeah, I still know how to drive. I mean, I don't know if I'm using, but yeah. I'm curious, so what is your definition of creativity?
Man, I gave you all these outs to like not state a direct definition, and then you're like, what is your definition? But
your definition, so not.
Okay, well, I'll try to give it my best shot. Also, as an aside, I think cleaning your room is a really good productivity starter. But if you're not careful, you can clean it too much and waste all your productive energy on cleaning, and then you're out of gas. Just clean it enough and then move on.
This sounds very close to home. This happened to you recently.
For all the creatives out there, you know, like when you do something to like procrastinate, but it's technically productive. Oh, and shouts out to Victor. We did a reality chat a little earlier on productivity and brought this up, where you can like the productivity engine, I think, is the same thing as a creativity engine, but like you can stoke it by starting to do productive things. But if you get off track too much, then like you have this trajectory of productivity that's leading you away from where you want to go. Anyways,
I agree. Yeah, completely.
So be careful with that, and you know yourself, so catch yourself. You'll know when it's time to stop. In terms of my thoughts on creativity, I think that there are some common ideas surrounding creativity that are not right or wrong, because I think when we have conversations like this, it's not about what's the correct definition. It's just, hey, what do we think, and how can we use our different thoughts to build something useful? And so I think certain thoughts are not as useful in practice as other thoughts, where like in the beginning I said sometimes creativity is like boxed in to only these type of things are creative. Like painting is creative, but shoemaking is, if I'm a cobbler, that's not creative. Yes, that's creative. You're making something. But also, I think making something that already exists, like you don't have to make something new in order for it to be creative. And there doesn't necessarily have to be anything new about what you're doing. Because sometimes you made the same thing, but you did it in a new way. That's creative. But if you make something and it's done doing a standard way, like you followed the cookbook and you made it, it can still be creative. I think creating there's the one part of it where you're making something, you created something, and it doesn't matter if you've made it 1,000 times before, you still created it. And then there's the part where I think it's a little bit more intense of a creativity, but it's not like the first one is not creativity, but the next level is some part about it is new to you. And so like if I
Yeah.
opened up a
I think
recipe book and I made a pie that I've never made before and I suffered some anxiety of maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong. I don't know if this what is a pinch? I don't know what a pinch is. And you're like that used to bug when I was a little kid because I was like, everybody has a different size hand, Mom. How do you know how big a pinch is? And so she bought
Oh
me these little measuring cups, and one was a pinch, and I was like, "Thanks, Mom." And I saw it.
wow. Is it like
Talk
like
about
a
support.
half a teaspoon?
I never
um,
measured it out. It says pinch on it, but
that's amazing.
there's that step. There's like I made something, and it's completely not new, and I didn't. I just followed directions. I made something that's still creative. That's still creating something. Then
Yeah.
there's making something that's new to you, but that's not that's like a higher form of creativity, and it may not be new to you, like you've never done it before. Maybe you did it in a new way, maybe using new materials, and maybe it's a totally new thing you've never tried. And then there's the I'm doing something that nobody has done, or at least I don't know anybody that's done it. I'm
Right.
kind of trailblazing, and even if somebody in India somewhere has done it, I don't know about them, and I've never heard of it. So this is new. And then there's the pinnacle, which is like this is actually new. Nobody has ever done this before.
Oh my god, yeah.
That's like the Neil Armstrong thing. But
Yeah.
all of those are creative, and all of those involve creativity, where I think it's about problem solving and figuring out ways to move forward. And it could be in building something. It could be if you're a dancer or a fighter, how to manage a certain movement.
Yeah.
If you're a rock climber, how to climb a new problem. Because there's like times where I'll spend literally months trying to climb something because I'm a rock climber, and then like figure out a new thing. Like don't use the bottom of your toe, use the side of your toe. And it's like, oh, this is so, and it like it changes the game, and now I'm able to climb it. And it's like to somebody that is not a rock climber, that might be like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But like to think that, like
Yeah.
I feel like anybody that's a creative can know that it's very easy to get trapped into standardized ways of doing things,
Yes.
and to pull yourself out of that and do something slightly different, even to just realize that that's possible, can be so difficult. And somebody's like, hey, have you ever just thought of using a stapler? And you're like, I could use a stapler. And it's like on your desk the whole time while you're trying to figure out the problem. But like,
Oh,
that's not what you normally do. So you're like, eh. But
yeah.
I think creativity is about seeking to do something as much as you can new or novel, or challenge yourself, or purposely breed anxiety in yourself, deal with it, and kind of conquer it. Which is why I think creative people are typically happier, or they're able to move through problems or get over problems more, because they self-inflict anxiety, and they
I was
they
gonna
figure out
say
ways to navigate around it.
anxiety. Yes, anxiety is like key to my life. Yeah. Um, I don't have much. That was an amazing. I love that. I think everything that you said, I completely agree with. Um, actually, yeah. So there was a while back, I was working with Inner City Arts, and it's this after school program for kids. And the idea was they wanted to encourage kids to be creative, not so that, oh, we're going to turn you guys into artists. You have to become painters. You have to do the traditional idea of like what it means to be creative, which again is not, it's not encompassing enough. But the purpose was they want kids to attend after school, you know, play around with new materials, just so that they could start working that part of their mind that problem solves. So it was exactly that. They were like, you know, this is for the future scientists, this is for the future engineer, this is for anybody. And I really loved that. It's a great program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've worked with kids a lot in my past, not so much right now. But like there's this one particular experience in terms of like the different levels that I was talking about of creativity, where it really like blew me away, like how much of a real thing that was. And I used to be a garden teacher. I ran this garden for an elementary school, and my job was to bring in the different classes of the different grades and teach them about gardening, and then also make sure the garden didn't die. Lucky for me, the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association, was like, way too into gardening, so they took care of everything. But
Oh, that's
I,
great.
it was, even though I do like gardening, I've been doing it since I was little. Back when I was a kid, in terms of talking about doing the whole process, I wanted to be a chef. And then I was like, if I'm going to
Oh,
be a chef,
wow.
I need to learn how to make my own food. And then without my mom's knowing, I like plowed up part of our lawn and like turned it into a garden. And she was like, what is this? And I was like, it's a little farm. And she was like,
How long, how long
okay.
did she not know for? Like, did you like put it on the side of your house or how?
It was in the backyard, and I did it in a few hours. But like she
Okay,
went to
okay.
work, and then I like tore up the back, and then it was.
Uh,
I always had this thought that like this is worth it, even if my mom grounds me or if she hits me, um, because it's fine. And
do
I'm like,
first, act later, right? Just
yeah. Um, but in terms of teaching the garden, I taught kindergarten through fifth grade about gardening stuff. And on the kindergarten level, we didn't do any gardening because I was like very scared of having them touch shovels and trowels and stuff like that.
they are
They're
kind of
like daggers and knives, and I was like, mm-mm. So what we would do is just walk around the garden, and I'd say, be gentle. These plants are like little pets. You can't squeeze them too much or whatever, but you can touch them. You can look at them, and we ask whatever questions you want. And that's all we did. We just went around and looked at plants every week and saw how they grew a little bit, grew a little bit, grew a little bit. And then as kindergarteners, they came to this epiphany that plants, that fruit and vegetables come from plants, not from the grocery store.
that's
Like
great. That's a
they had,
big that no,
yeah.
that's huge.
And they were amazed to see like carrots that were not perfectly straight, like carrots that were like gnarled, or
Mm,
how a flower would turn into something. And to them, that was creative because they were expanding their worldview of what was possible and what was real. And
yeah.
as we got older and older into fifth grade, it was more like, yo, we're going to plant stuff. Hey, take care of this plant. This is your plant. And if it has a problem, we'll talk about it. We'll go on the internet and figure out what these bugs are or what this mold is, and we'll fix it. And they were like taking care of specific plants. And then at the end, we had this harvest day where all the kids in the whole school came together, and we pulled up the whole garden. And with the help of the parents, like we cooked food, and we had the kids taste raw stuff, and we had them taste the cooked food. And all the kids, I'd be like, yo, this is a carrot, taste it. And they put it in their mouth and be like, this ain't a carrot, this tastes good. And I'd be like, when you grow a carrot for real without chemicals and stuff, it tastes good. And they're like, carrots taste like crap and water. And I'm like, no, they don't. They taste like this. What you're eating is not really a carrot. And then we'd have this whole talk, and they'd be like, what are you talking about? And I'd be like sitting there explaining like genetically modified substances and like crop dusting and stuff to kids. And they'd be like asking questions, and then we'd come up with little experiments and ways to show it. And we'd go, oh, there's a good video on this. We got back to the classroom, and I had like a classroom. We'd watch videos and stuff. And depending on how old they were and what their capacity was to learn, it was very like they were experiencing the garden in a different way, but all at their level. And I think they were all pushing their limits at whatever level they were at. So
yeah, no, I mean, there's a few things there that I mean, I think, yeah, for me, I feel, if we're going to talk about inspiration and how that can lead into creativity, I often feel inspired when I look at nature, because I just think, oh my gosh, this is the greatest form of creation. It's incredible. And then with the kids, I just loved how you're talking about them throwing ideas back and forth, and they were trying to figure out how to solve, I guess, genetically modified. I don't know what problems they were trying to solve, but they were trying to solve the world problems. Because I mean, this is going back again to why I think everybody does have it in them and wants to be creative, and being creative is very fulfilling and brings us so much joy when we allow ourselves and we believe in ourselves and we just do it, whatever it might be. But I was giving a talk at one of my friend's classes. He has a second graders that he teaches. And I know, and this was about a year ago. I had a Zoom thing I did recently, but a year ago I was able to go into the classroom in person. And I was telling them about what I do. And it was so fun because one of his classes, they got really excited. Like they would try and like they would ask me a lot of questions, and they were trying to even design like on the spot. They like someone was like, what if you put a heart on a shirt? And I was like, yeah, that would be amazing. And then someone was like, wait, but what if it was a broken heart? And they were just, all of them were collaborating in lifetime. And then by the end of the class, I didn't know, but by the end of the class there was a boy who was drawing all of it the whole time.
Nice.
And he dramatically tore it from his notebook, and he was like, here it is. I was like, oh, thank you. And yeah, kids are so pure. I feel like, I don't know, that's why I go back to my childhood a lot, is I try and remember, when without all that self-doubt and the weight that you start to accumulate as you grow older, the bills and, just realizing the world is not as pristine as you once thought it to be. I go back to childhood, and I don't know, it often like remotivates me and reminds me like why I create or what inspires me to create. And yeah.
Okay. I think, I don't know if this is going to get too semantical, but I'm really interested in philosophy. I like thinking and coming up with ideas and sharing ideas with people. That's like what I really like to do, which doesn't always seem like a product to everybody. But I think a lot of times when people walk away from an event that I put on or a conversation with me, their mind is like buzzing with all these new things. Yeah. And hopefully it causes some like good change in their life. But what was I going to say? Did I just forget what I was going to say? When you're creating something, I think it's interesting the perspective you take. Like, I was helping a poet friend of mine teach a Saturday morning poetry class to some like fifth graders. And we're like, oh, we're going to learn how to write poems. And it was like right after Kobe passed, rest in peace, Kobe. So we were writing Kobe poems. And they asked me, my friend was like, yo, I'm a poet. I'm going to spit some poetry, blah, blah, blah. This is my assistant. He's an engineer. He makes airplanes. And they were like, what? You make airplanes? No.
Were they all there? I was just screaming.
And I was like, yeah. And like, they wanted to ask some questions, and a couple of them were curious about like why I was helping with like a poetry class. And I was like, well, engineering's pretty creative if you look at it right. And I think the perspective drives whether or not something is something or isn't something. Where like the blind men and the elephant, if like three blind men happen upon an elephant and one touches the trunk, he'll say it's a snake. If one touches the foot, he'll say it's a tree. If one touches the tail, he'll say it's a snake. And it's like, I mean, who's right, who's wrong? I don't really think it's important to say who's right and who's wrong, but in terms of the perspective drives a lot of what it is. We got into this talk about math, and I always ask this question when I'm working with kids now: what is math? I was never asked that question until I was 20 years old, and I've been taking math classes forever. But nobody ever took the time to tell me what math was, or even tried to make me think about it. They were just like, do this problem, do this packet, go to this page, do this, the answer's in the back, test on Friday. But never like, why? Why are we doing this? What's the importance? And what are we doing? Like, and
I'm curious now, what is math?
Math is the act of recognizing patterns and then applying those patterns to situations. It can be either one of those things. Anytime you recognize a pattern, any equation is a pattern. It's a statement of a pattern. And then when you can recognize a pattern, and this could be, it doesn't always have to have numbers. I think a lot of people think math involves numbers, but it doesn't. That's like saying language involves the English alphabet. It's like, no, I could speak Japanese. Like the English alphabet is just some random set of letters I use to help me explain some language. And numbers are some random set of symbols that I use to help me explain math. But math is not numbers. And when you do algebra, you figure that out pretty quick because numbers start going away and you start getting letters and stuff, which is interesting because in kindergarten we were doing algebra where they'd be like 1
Really?
plus candlestick equals 3. What is candlestick? And then you'd be like, oh, it's 2. And then you get to like 7th grade and they're like 1 plus X is 3. What is X? And you're like, oh, it's a letter. I don't know what to do. But it's like,
That is interesting. I never thought of that.
but it's just about recognizing the pattern. And
Yeah.
if you're doing that in any way, shape, or form, and that's any type of problem solving, you're doing some form of pattern recognition or applying your knowledge of patterns. And we all do math. And I don't think there's any reason why anybody should be afraid of math or call it something that's mundane or boring or for nerds. It's something that's for everybody, and it helps you learn concepts to make you better at problem solving so you can go out and be creative in non-hardcore number ways.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I do wish that math was taught differently through school because I don't know. I think that if you show an interest in, what we might consider like the humanities and the arts, if you show a natural interest in that, I think you're led to believe that you're not going to be good at math, right? I mean, that's at least, no, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all, but at least that, huh?
This is just my thinking face. Don't mind it.
Yeah. But I do wish that it was taught differently because I think I was always like, I didn't know that this was the reason I wasn't very interested in it, but I just didn't understand the purpose of it beyond very basic arithmetic. I was like, yeah, of course I'm going to need to add, like subtract, multiply, divide, all that. But why do I need to know the little triangle under the ladder? Like, why do I need to know that area? I wish that there was, I don't know, I wish it was less regimented, less about following, I guess, the rules. I wish maybe, teachers were allowed to be more creative with how they could have taught math. I don't know, but that was a little bit of a tangent.
No. I think if you really get to the heart of being a true anything, like a true engineer or a true designer or a true plumber or whatever, you're not limited to only design textbooks if you're a designer or architecture textbooks if you're an architect.
Yeah.
It's your job to look at all the information that you can find from the perspective of a designer.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
if you're like, oh, I'm an artist, so I don't need math, like that's garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
true.
my opinion, but I'm gonna say it as if it's a fact. You should look at everything, but from the perspective of who you are. And everything may not be useful to exactly what you're doing, but it is possible. Everything's just information, and it's about, again, with your perspective, how you're looking at it. Me as an engineer, or me as a rock climber, every time I look at a building, like my first thought, an architect is probably like, oh, how's this built or how's that? And my first thought is like, man, I think I can climb that. Like, but it's the same building.
That's awesome. I love that you say that because, sorry, don't want to interrupt.
I was just gonna like summarize with like, I think all information is good information.
I agree. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that when I was finally able to decide on the courses I wanted when I went to community college, I think my instinct was I took all the design classes, I took all the fashion design classes, but I also wanted to take other disciplines. So I took sculptural welding, I took photography, and of course my GEs and everything, but I loved all of it. And I did feel like every single course, even like, even if I was taking archaeology, like it was still something that I felt like, I don't know, I'm gaining something from this. I don't know exactly how I'm going to use it yet. But everything that I acquire, who knows, this could inspire me at some point, or this could generate an idea that I wouldn't have come to had I not immersed myself in this new experience. Yeah.
And I think if you're trying to get to this like high level of creativity, which is like ultimate novelty, like it's the new thing on the block, it's the Tesla Roadster that's orbiting Earth because they put it in space for some reason. If you're trying to hit that, like it takes so much, because I think you can agree with this. I'm gonna assume you're agreeing. If you disagree, like just tell me.
I'll like raise my hand. No.
Yeah, like, hey, excuse me. Like you're pursuing being a fashion designer, and there's certain things that are like harshly connected to that, which is like fashion designing, drawing, sewing. But there's things that are necessary but not harshly connected, like business and money management and logistics and things like that, where it's like if all you did was focus on like, oh, this is a fashion thing, you would fail.
Yeah.
You need to know other things, and you need to know what we learned in mechanical engineering when I did my degree in ME. It wasn't like we need to know hardcore everything about all these subjects. I just need to know enough about this subject to know when it applies to my situation, so I know where to go look up information. I can be like, oh, this is a thermodynamics problem, to the thermo textbook, rather than like, I have no idea, just where do I even start? But as you start learning little bits of different things, then, because life is kind of like Jeopardy, where you never know what somebody's going to ask, or what problem you're going to come up against. But if you have like good base of general knowledge and you're connecting it with your experiences and it's the stuff that's interesting to you, I think you're a lot better off in being creative, because you have all these other things to rely on rather than just like the standards of your industry.
Right. Yeah, having blinders on and like a very narrow focus. I think that's another thing that can affect someone's maybe satisfaction with how creative they think they're being, because they're measuring themselves only by what they think others expect and what they think they're supposed to do. They only have the blinders on. They're like, I'm only going to focus on learning these things and I don't need anything else. But yeah, I think that that's key to creativity is learning so much and bringing all of those concepts and ideas together and meshing them into something that might be completely like new to you and unexpected, as you were saying earlier. Yeah.
I think a good way to say that, because it just came out on Netflix, is that if you want to have ultimate power, aka be the avatar, you need to know how to airbend.
Oh, we're talking about the Avatar now. Okay.
And firebend. And even within that, like firebending is like lightning bending, and good firebending and bad firebending. Earth bending is like sand bending, and
Metal bending.
metal bending. And so you got to learn all these different parts. So at the end, because you don't know when you get into a fight if you're going to be in a room full of metal or a room full of dirt. And if you don't know how to metal bend and all you know how to earth bend, you're going to be out of luck.
Oh, I'm so glad you. I just finished Korra. So good. I mean, okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to catch up on that.
We'll talk later. Yeah.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left, so
wow. I
wanted to say thank you, Michelle, for having this talk. I don't want to cut you off. I never want to cut these conversations off, but Instagram is just going to close out in 2 minutes.
Gotcha.
So thank you. This has been Reality Chat with Michelle Hebert on creativity. She is an amazingly creative person. If you haven't, check her Instagram out. It has like this extremely long list of beautiful pictures of all of her work, and like some of her work, it's beautiful in a way that doesn't even make sense to me, and I can't even describe it. So like, just go look at it, and then you'll see what I mean. But she, I think, long-term consistently is a creative, and she's doing different things, and you can see obviously from her work. So I'd say go check that out. This video will be on my YouTube page in whenever I feel like putting it up. So if you want to watch that later, you can go to my Instagram account and check out my bio website and go to YouTube. But yeah, we have a minute left. So thank you guys. Michelle, did you want to leave everybody with anything or plug anything you're doing?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jordan, and it's always wonderful talking to you. And if anyone isn't following Jordan, they definitely should. He's brilliant, and I've known him for a long time. But I'm scared. I don't know when the time's gonna end. So.
We got 30 seconds.
Okay. I'm sorry. Like, thank you, goodbye, my last words. But really, thank you so much. If you guys were able to stick around, or if you were just coming in, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I feel like either of us, you can message and ask us anything or
Oh,
clarify.
definitely. Yeah. If you thought this was interesting and you want to continue the conversation, some of the reality chats I have are people asking me to talk, and I'm like, yeah, let's just do a chat. And I'm like, okay. But we got like 5 seconds left. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.